And according to a court indictment, journalist Don Lemon and others are now facing federal charges in connection with their reporting on scene of anti-ICE protesters disrupting a church service in St. Paul, Minnesota on January 18th. Now, Lemon and independent journalist George Ford, who was also arrested, have been released from custody, as Ike pointed out. But Lemon says he is not guilty, and he and his attorney plan to fight this case. For more on what's next for the journalist and the precedent this sets for other journalists, I want to bring in ABC News legal analyst Brian Buckmire and Errin Haines, the president of the National Association of Black Journalists and editor at large for the 19th. Brian, Errin, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Brian, I want to start with you. You and I have talked about this at length, but what stands out to you from this indictment? And does the government have a strong case here?
So we're going to step back and look at this case in its totality and also what the allegations are. Don Lemon, along with the independent reporter that you mentioned, are charged with what's called the violation of the FACE Act, which in essence says that you cannot disrupt a person's ability to exercise the First Amendment right as it applies to religion by what I think they're going to probably argue here, and what they did is by obstructing their ability to go in or out of that church facility. What we're seeing, though, is him interviewing individuals, even the indictment itself saying that he was present when this kind of situation was planned out. Doesn't say that he participated in planning out what was going to happen, that he interviewed the leader of this church, that he was so close that the church leader bumped into him, and that he asked people questions outside. The other charge being that he conspired to violate someone else's constitutional rights in the context of religion. I don't see it here. I don't see the argument, especially if people are participating and doing an interview with him, and he's not blocking people's ability to go in and out. He's not really part of this organization. So I think the government has a pretty weak case, and the judge highlighted that by releasing both of them, even though the government was asking for a $100,000 bond.
Yeah, we certainly see the video of him interviewing the pastor of that church. Errin, I turn to you because Don Lemon wasn't the only journalist who was arrested and charged. Minneapolis-based independent journalist George Ford also facing those charges. How concerning is this, and what do you think this signals about press freedom here in this country?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning Don and Georgia, both, independent journalists who were arrested for doing their jobs. I mean, they are out of federal custody, but the question today is really why they were there in the first place, right? I mean, their release does not erase the chilling effect that all of us felt watching this. Journalists were detained for lawful news gathering, and that sends a message far beyond this case. It is a message about press freedom because the First Amendment isn't something that can just apply when coverage is convenient, right? It exists precisely for moments like protests and unrest and public dissent. So the First Amendment really only matters if it still holds up when power is uncomfortable. And I think that is the discussion that we have to keep having, even as they are now out of federal custody, but where we go from here is very important.
And I know this is a discussion that's been happening among journalists, but Errin, you say this arrest should alarm every American. Why is that, and what do you want the general public to know?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is not about protecting journalists as a special class. This is really about protecting the public's right to know, which is at risk when there are attempts to intimidate or silence journalists with their, with things like their arrest. When journalists are blocked or when they are arrested, the public loses independent information. And that really should be seen as a threat to democracy. So that's why I say it should be alarming, not just to every member of our profession, but really to every member of the public that is concerned about their right to know. Every major civil rights movement in this country depended on journalists being able to show up and record and report without interference.
There's so many implications here. Brian Buckmire and Errin Haines, thank you so much for weighing in on this.